Welcome to a place where stories come alive, where ideas turn into inspiration, and knowledge becomes power.
All right, let's dive right in. We're about to take a journey into what is, by far, the most complex object in the known universe, the human mind. I mean, it's the source of everything we are. And today, we're going to start peeling back some of those layers. You know the feeling, right? We've all been there. You wake up from some completely bizarre dream, and you're just left thinking, where on earth did that come from? It's your own mind, but seriously, sometimes it feels like a total stranger is at the controls. Or, that moment when words just tumble out of your mouth and you spend the next hour, maybe the next day, replaying it, asking yourself why. These little cogs of consciousness, they're always turning, always cranking away, and they make everything possible, from our absolute greatest achievements to our most cringeworthy moments. So, what is going on up there? Seriously, how does this 3-pound universe inside our heads actually work? Well, that is the central question of psychology. It's the science that's dedicated to figuring ourselves out. Okay, so let's get into it and define what we're actually talking about. Because, while humans have been asking these big questions about the mind pretty much forever, the actual science of psychology has a surprisingly short history. The word psychology actually comes from the Latin for the study of the soul, which is pretty cool. But today's modern definition is way more precise. It's the science that tackles both our observable actions, our behavior, and our entire internal world of thoughts and feelings, our mental processes. But like I said, our curiosity about the mind, it is not new. I mean, thousands of years ago, you had Aristotle thinking consciousness was in the heart, not the brain. 2,000 years ago, Chinese rulers were giving psychological exams to public officials. And way back in the late 800s, a Persian doctor named Rhazes was already describing and treating mental illness. So for centuries, we've been trying to figure ourselves out. The scientific approach, though, that's way, way more recent. So, when we talk about the science of psychology, what's the first image that pops into your head? Because for most people, it's one very specific person and one very specific piece of furniture. Come on, you can admit it. You're probably picturing a guy with a beard, maybe a cigar, listening very intently while a patient lies on a couch. That image, that is pure Sigmund Freud, and it's basically become the pop culture symbol for the entire field. And look, while Freud was, without a doubt, a hugely influential and, pretty controversial thinker, he's just one part of a much, much bigger story. The field is this huge melting pot of ideas, and he definitely wasn't the one who lit the first fire. In fact, right around the same time Freud was doing his thing, the very first formal scientific psychology labs were getting started, and they were tackling the mind in a totally different way. And this led to the first really big debate in psychology. Okay, so on one side, you had the structuralists, guys like Wilhelm Wundt. In the very first psych lab, they tried to break the mind down into its most basic parts. They do things like show someone a rose and ask them to describe every single little sensation and feeling, a process they called introspection. But then, on the other side, you had the functionalists, led by William James. He was inspired by Darwin and asked a totally different question. Not what is the mind made of, but why do we have one? What's the purpose, the function of things like fear or love? How do those things help us survive? And this brilliant quote from William James really captures the whole spirit of functionalism. He called psychology the science of mental life. He was all about focusing on our lived, real-world experiences, not just picking apart these abstract components. And that really set the stage for a more complete way of understanding the mind. Okay, but while these structuralists and the functionalists were having this big debate, Freud was off developing a theory that would just change everything. It was an idea centered on a part of our mind that we can't even get to directly, the unconscious. This was it. This was Freud's most revolutionary idea. The theory that we are all driven by motives and memories that we literally aren't even aware of. Now, today, that might sound almost obvious, but back in 1900, the idea that our minds could be driven by forces we couldn't even access, that was absolutely astonishing. It suggested this whole hidden world inside of us, just full of repressed feelings and buried memories that still had a ton of power over our daily lives. And this wasn't just some abstract theory. It led to a monumental breakthrough in how we treat people. I mean, before Freud, people with mental illnesses were often just locked away, even shackled in sanatoriums. Psychoanalysis introduced the radical idea that these disorders could actually be healed through talk therapy and self-discovery. It was a humane, hopeful revolution, a total game changer.
So we've got the early scientific debates on one hand, and we've got Freud's game-changing theories on the other. So where does that leave us? What does the field look like today? Well, it's basically a synthesis of all these histories, and a whole lot more. Modern psychology really is an integrative science. It's a true melting pot of ideas. You've still got bits of Freud's legacy in what we call psychodynamic theories. Then you add in behaviorism, which focuses only on what we can see and measure. You mix in humanist psychology, which is all about reaching our full potential. And today, the whole thing is supercharged by cognitive science, the study of how we think, and neuroscience, which looks at the brain's actual hardware. So yeah, the point I really want you to take home is that psychology is an integrative science. At the end of the day, the human mind is just too complex for any one single approach. To even begin to understand it, we have to look at it from all sides, integrating every perspective we can to try and get a clearer picture.
I mean, just let this sink in. This quote is from an astronomer at Harvard, someone whose job is to gaze into the vastness of the cosmos. And he's saying that the most complex physical object we know about is right here, between our ears. And the most amazing part, we all have one. We are literally living inside the very frontier we're trying to explore. The whole history of psychology is just the story of that exploration so far. And the biggest discoveries are still ahead of us. So the real question is, what will we discover next?